So thrilled that all of you are here. I'm Justin Clifford. I work at Bereave. I'm going to be your host today. Loss Leaders is a program centered around how companies could, and frankly, we think should, step up when a loss occurs in the lives of their employees. And the reason that we do these programs is because Bereave is on a mission to help companies provide the absolute best possible bereavement response when their employees suffer a loss. And in that pursuit, we get to meet incredible companies and incredible people that can just bring so much education to business leaders that are working on or hoping to work on building a more compassionate and empathetic workplace. So instead of hogging these people to ourselves, we bring them to you every couple of weeks. The chat is open and we'll monitor for questions. We're going to go 45 minutes past the hour or so. And yes, we'll send out the recordings by the end of the week. And lastly, a quick reminder that this program is SHRM PDC approved, and we'll provide that code at the end and in our follow-up if you're looking for it. Now, you're here for Matt Troskey. Matt has a very unique perspective on loss, both personally and in the workplace. Matt and I have spent probably 3 or 4 hours together in the past month, 6 weeks or so, just kind of getting to know each other. He's been very generous with his time and insights. As an HR leader in resort towns in the Pacific Northwest, Matt has managed multiple employee fatalities and working through the workplace in those moments, including a highly publicized triple fatality caused by an avalanche. He has produced and shared standards for employee loss, ultimately being asked to share those experience and response methods to large audiences as a gold standard. He's here to talk today about those experiences and those responses in hopes that you'll be able to integrate some of his work into your world. Matt, welcome to Loss Leaders.
Thank you, Justin. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming today.
I'd like to start with just kind of like a foundational question, almost just to kind of get a little bit of share a little bit of your perspective on life and death. You shared something with me, and I know that you don't take credit for this quote, but something that you mentioned specifically, I now refer to kind of as the dash. You said that on a tombstone, there's a birth date, there's a dash, and a death date. The dash is the most important part. And I made a lot of assumptions about what I think that means, or at least what it means to me. Can you talk a little bit about what it means to you and why you said that?
Sure. And credit to Linda Ellis. I think I went and found that afterwards, just because I realized I'm out there and I'm going to be recorded. I want to give credit where credit's due. Great poem. And I've actually used that as an activity, is where it was introduced to me, where someone talked about writing your own eulogy. Do the dash. What gets said between those two dates. And I think for me, I study the Stoics, Stoicism, and one of the things they talk about is the you of yesterday is dead already, but it also lives on in you today. And for me, that encapsulates this precious time we have between those two dates. And so I think, Linda speaks about consider what your eulogy will be like. And are you living, the best life of, intention that you set out to be, right? Or your purpose, your mission, that which fulfills you and helps fulfill other people. And so I think that that's one of the big things about focusing on what's important to you, as opposed to fearing that date that we don't know that's coming. And so I think that that's the other piece. And then as it relates to part of today's conversation, I think too, those two dates are what we tend to focus our leave laws on. Right. And so all the other events that happen during the dash, we have some policies and practices that deal with those, but typically it's those big life events as opposed to some of the other ones that still are called for, that call us to hold space for people, as HR leaders, as companies, to be able to say, you're not able to be present right now. Where you need to show up is not at work. So I think that that's the other piece that's instructive for me, is, work certainly is a large part of our life for a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm.
And so we should recognize that we want to take care of the whole person, because we expect, much of the whole person to come to work in terms of, their work ethic and their timeliness and their honesty. Right. So
Sure.
let's also accept the rest of them. And certainly that goes into all sorts of other aspects of how we create a sense of belonging in the workplace.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. And I think that's the first time in this conversation between you and I that I've even remotely taken it away from myself. Right. So I've been spending my time, when I think about this quote, thinking about like, hey, how do I make the best of my dash? Right? How do I make the dash a priority with all of the world that's going on around me, and chasing 2 young kids and working on a business and all of these things that I can kind of get caught up in? How do I step back and reflect? Like, that's where my mind has gone. And you just brought me to a point of thinking about everybody else, which is part of the key here, is to be a more empathetic person, workplace, people, society, to like thinking about other people's dash, right? And thinking about their relationship to work as Bereave starts to employ folks, or other companies start to employ people, thinking about them in that term of the dash, which is not something that I had really processed until just now. When you know that quote, was there a moment where that kind of flipped for you? It's like, hey, Matt's own dash is important, but like, wow, there's this dash for all these other people that we employ. How do we think about that?
Great question. I'm not sure if there was a place where it flipped. I working in HR, one of my guiding principles is creating healthy and productive workplaces. And so that, to me, is part of my dash, is to make sure that we respect that and invite everyone in to the workplace, that no one gets left behind. We used to have a saying when I taught outdoor ed for 10 years, in our group building curriculum. We said, nobody wins until everybody wins, and that was kind of I think that, again, that's an approach I have taken with me for several different workplaces.
Yeah. No, I love it. We're going to start a Matt Troskey wall of quotes in the Bereave office here, because my next question is actually on a quote, on another thing that you said to me that has really stood out, and you said it relatively early on in our conversation that kind of like caught me off guard. I've never heard anybody say this, but you said, Justin, I have a honed relationship with death. And I understood a little bit because I had understood some experiences. You had shared some experiences already, but when you said I have a honed relationship with death, can you explain that statement?
Yeah, I reflected on that a fair bit, actually, after you commented on it, just to make sure I could speak to it. I think being an outdoors person, that it's a metaphor for me of, I think about sharpening a knife, right? You pull back the old edge to uncover a new, sharp, useful edge, right? That's the process of honing. And that speaks to doing work. If you don't do the work is going to work on you, maybe in some maladaptive ways, when it comes to the grief process, right? And dealing with trauma. So that notion of how will you be now? Kubler-Ross has a quote about you'll grieve forever, right? And it's, you'll never get over it, but it's you'll never be whole again, nor would you want to be. Not it's something, nor should you be the same, nor would you want to be the same, right? There's a transformative property there that allows you to really know that life is learning, And so even in these moments of, trauma and loss, and deep pain, there's still learning.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mentioned the kind of your perspective on loss, both personal and the workplace, and you've been around lots of loss in your life. Just for a kind of a baseline understanding for the folks that are with us today, can you give a little bit of background about where this honed relationship from death has come from?
Sure. My journey, aside from, I think, growing up and losing, grandma, grandpa, aunts and uncles, which coming from my dad's side of the family was fairly large. So that happened a fair bit, but it really kicked off. I guess the first time that the work did its work on me was when I was 20. Very close friend of mine died by suicide. And that was within a month of my grade principal out of high school, he and his wife being murdered by their son, who I went to school with. So there was, in 2 months' time, there was just this tremendous, tragedy in my area and in my life. And so that was, the beginning of it. And I remember struggling. And it wasn't that I had my own ideation. I just remember my friend found a solution to his problems, right? He was in, he and I were both kind of struggling with some of the achievement wheel struggles, and man, he found a solution, and I was a little envious, but that was as far as it went. And then from there, my relationship with the death process was typically a Catholic mass followed by going to the P&A club, or someone's house, kind of that Midwest, bring food, everybody hangs out and waxes poetic. When I was in college, I lost a friend to cancer, and I was also studying in a Native American worldviews class, the Anishinaabe, circle of life and thoughts around death there. And that really helped me start to grasp my own, or form my own values around death. And so that was instructive. And then fast forward to the year 2001, I was on a seasonal wildfire crew. About 6 weeks into the job, there was a group that got dispatched, and 4 firefighters died in a burnover. 3 of them were rookies, and they're in their first year. It was the first death, and certainly the first big tragedy for a lot of young people on the fire crew. And again, I had a little more life experience, if you will, at that point. So there was just some observations I made about, I think well-intentioned attempts at critical incident stress debriefings, but not effective ones. And being able to, and I was just getting started in my HR career at that point. So that was a piece of it. And then about 6 years into my HR world, my father passed, not unexpectedly, but suddenly. And that followed, that was the hardest 6 to 12 months of my life. I was a wreck after that really hit me hard. And then, fast forward another 3 years, my mother died, but she died at home with hospice. My wife and I right there taking care of her, and best job I've ever had. That was a glorious time. If I, can, I'll say that because I know that I feel that way. And that represented, a month away from work. So to speak to, I know we'll talk about policies here.
Sure.
That was 2 months away from work for me, actually. A month of taking care of her, and then a month packing up the house.
Hmm.
And so that was a really huge juxtaposition in terms of my experiences of being able to go back to work and feeling very grounded and very
Hmm.
whole from my
Hmm.
mother's experience, as opposed to going back after my dad's death. And, you know, most people would say the company did not get its money's worth out of me, right,
Hmm.
for 6 months.
Sure.
And so there was that, that set the stage or put me in a position to where 2 years after my mom died, there was this triple fatality, avalanche fatality, Tunnel Creek
Hmm.
at Stevens Pass. And, you know, because of my relationship with death at that point, I think I was able to be of service. I was able to
Hmm.
help, as opposed
Hmm.
to just sit in my own, you know, impactedness.
Yeah.
And then really the year after that, there was another employee fatality,
Hmm.
uh, you know, a couple years later after that. And then I left Stevens, went to another resort, uh, and became, you know, the person who kind of went to the aid room or to the clinic when there was a guest fatality, just to kind of deal with the family and help
Hmm.
them through that. Uh, and then there was a couple more employees at that resort, including
Hmm.
another triple fatality, which was offsite, you know, on their weekend, but it was a triple fatality of, you
Right.
know, young people, right? That life cut
Hmm.
too short sensation.
Hmm.
So those were all, you know, through that process. Each time I go through it, I feel like I'm learning more about,
Hmm.
you know, really how to hold space for people, how to take care of
Hmm.
myself,
Hmm.
and you know what we can do as organizations to support people in
Hmm.
those moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I think hearing those things was kind of uh, when I kind of was able to put together your statement about having a honed relationship with loss. So that's super helpful. You mentioned, and it might have been in the firefighters. Was that the first time you needed to support people in a professional setting uh, in loss?
Uh, Not by role.
Okay.
I was a, you know, squad leader, or, you know, firefighter at that point. Wasn't
Hmm.
even a squad leader, and so
Hmm.
uh, I was supporting people because of who I was, not because of a
Gotcha.
title, right?
Right.
So it was
Right.
still a professional setting,
Sure.
and yeah, that was, I think, also instructive to my
Sure.
HR work, right, years
Right.
later.
Right. So how did you know? I mean, you're early on, and not even in an HR role at that point, but whether it's that role or an HR role, the first time you start having to step up in these moments, like how did you know what to do?
A great question. I might have to pass on that one. You know, like, it's one of those in the moment,
Yeah.
right?
Sure. Sure.
You start to synthesize all these different things about how to navigate the landscape, you know, the people, you know,
Hmm.
who, you know, who to rely on, being situationally aware to see
Hmm.
who's stepping up and who's stumbling.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I say that not from a superior standpoint, right? We
Sure.
all, like, I had my moments. I
Sure.
had plenty of
Sure.
them, bad ones. And so, you know, it is that sense of building that community, uh, to do that. One of the things with the Tunnel Creek situation, for sure, was I was surrounded by a huge mass of other
Hmm.
high level professional people,
Hmm.
amazing ski
Totally.
patrol, you know, the parking department. I mean, just, you know,
Hmm.
marshaling people to get, you know, resources around to the recovery site,
Hmm.
food and beverage. Right. I mean, the,
Hmm.
you know, ski resorts are kind of their own city. So you've got all those resources at your fingertips to some degree,
Hmm.
but man,
Sure.
kicking out food and water and, you know, being able to make sure people get fed and deal with that physiological
Hmm.
response to stress. So I
Hmm.
think that was part of it. Um,
Hmm.
you know, and then I think the other, it made me very open
Hmm.
to someone said, hey, I know this chaplain who helped. We had a fatality on the river, the rafting company that I worked for. Can we bring this chaplain in? And I'm like, yeah, let's see where that goes, right? And that turned out to be, I think, 5 or 6 chaplains for a week. We put them up in spread them out in a room in a restaurant that was kind of closed off, and just let people go, talk to them. And more than that, because I know people won't just go won't go seek help. I was walking around with my legal pad. Literally, I built a radar screen of like, here are the people who I'm a little concerned about today.
Sure.
And that list changed every day. And I'd go talk to them. And sometimes I'd walk them up to the counselors and say, what, just spend a little bit of time talking to them. And so that was taking a real hands-on approach turned out to be key. And and maybe getting ahead of myself, but the other piece to that was also really trying to help managers and leadership understand as well, because we had a lot of non-performance issues, right? And the HR folks on the call, a lot of them know this, right? When you see non-performance out of somebody who's usually a high performer, you don't just run to the pip. You don't just start thinking about coaching and correction. It's like, what else is going on, right? There's when somebody's late to work, do you get upset, or do you start to concern yourself with whether they're in a ditch somewhere? And I think the ability to be open and non-assumptive in those moments is also really key.
Right. Yeah. And I was going to ask you what you learned in those in those early experiences that helped you later. But I think I want to kind of come back to maybe reframing that, because I think there are a lot of people probably watching that have never had to support employee loss at work. What are some things, just maybe foundational things, that they can take away? So if they are faced with a situation of an employee passing away, that just foundationally, what are some considerations they could have in their mind for those moments?
First, recognize who you are. Right. If I had a really solid HR team around me, and I had my relationship with death, that positioned me to do what I felt needed to be done. Not everybody's going to have that same situation, or you may have the solid team and not the relationship, right? Or the lived experience. But figure out what you can do, and then find your resources. One of the things that when I presented on Tunnel Creek, talking about, managing the deaths, and these 3 folks were well-loved members of the community as well. So it was around me when I went home. Their OSHA investigation, there was just so much to manage. One of the things I remember presenting on was it's important to have these relationships and this network in place before you need it. Don't try to run around and find, when you experience the fatality, that's not the time to go try to start a chaplain's program, or to, find counselors, or wonder if your life insurance policy, in your benefits plan provides for counselors on site. Right. And so I think that those are some things you can do right away to try to build your network, build those resources. And the culture you have is the culture you're going to have in these moments, meaning, they can be culture building. Sure. You can enhance your culture in moments like this. But if you already had a culture where people are having to code switch, they're more concerned about being talked to about their dress or their hair length, or their, tattoos, or, their pride flag, on their shirt, then you're not going to get, these folks already don't feel like they belong. They already feel marginalized. And so the ability to make sure you're doing the work to really create a sense of belonging and have equity, it is going to be the foundation of trust that your employees need in order to step into that space that you've created for them.
Mhm.
You know, you can just imagine the toxic leader going, yeah, we've got these resources and my door's always open. You can come talk to me if anyone's hurting.
Mhm.
And it's like, boy, if nobody wanted to talk to you before,
Right.
nobody wants to talk
Right.
to you now. So
Sure.
I think that that's the key. And I think getting beyond empathy in our leaders, but really
Mhm.
trying to, go through a mental health first aid class, take your
Mhm.
leadership team, get signed up for that.
Mhm.
Think about how to be compassionate, not just empathetic. And I
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
delineate those, right? Compassion is action. There's an action
Mhm.
included with that. Even if it's just, again, holding space for people,
Mhm.
learning how to not center yourself. Um, you know, Reach out to a chaplain's group.
Mhm. Mhm.
Part of my paying it forward was after Tunnel Creek, I enrolled in a chaplaincy program, and I went through that. And I learned, there were some people that had some trepidation around that because they didn't
Mhm.
identify as Christian, which was the organization that was sponsoring the chaplaincy program. And
Mhm.
gosh, I heard at least 2 dozen times in my chaplaincy program, your job is not to fix people's theology.
Mm. Right.
And
Right.
and uh, so that was one of the keys for me as I went forward, being able to make sure that if I was talking to resources, if I was talking to folks that were from an outside agency and not part of my, under contract with me through life insurance or EAP, that we were aligned on making
Mhm.
sure that I didn't have employees getting turned off because they felt like they were getting preached at when
Right.
they didn't want to get preached at.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So I think there's that. As I was getting ready for this call, I was thinking about, end of life planning, which a lot of
Mhm.
EAPs or life insurance plans have, being able to promote that, making sure,
Mhm.
how many people can raise their hand and say, yes, all of our employees know all of the benefits that are available to them in our defined
Mhm.
benefit plan. Right. So we can always educate people on those things, uh, highlighting that in team news before you have to.
Mhm.
Again,
Right.
just being
Right.
able to take a time and talk about that, and so I think that that's some of the stuff I can think of in terms of putting some structures in place.
Yeah. No. Hugely helpful. Uh, One of the things that kind of caught me off guard when we were talking a little bit about Tunnel Creek, uh, and the response there was just all of the considerations that needed attention. I mean, we talked about business continuity was one of them. Like, do we continue to operate? Like, let's start. Like, got to run the
Do we have,
business, maybe, or
yeah,
should we not? Right?
yeah. Do we have enough people
Thinking of
showing up to run the
right,
business
right.
the
Employee
next couple of
healing.
days?
You talked a lot about helping the community because it was a tight knit community, and the resort was a big part of that. Working with surviving families, OSHA, a massive OSHA investigation, your own grieving, right? There's all of these things that you and the team are kind of focused on. How do you, with all of those things and such limited amount of time during the day, like how do you start to prioritize those things as a leader?
Well, I think in that moment, uh, that became one of those times where, right, I'm salary for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting paid to get the job done,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's going to be a 70 or 80 hour week,
Mm-hmm.
and again, knowing that one of the things that happened for me at Tunnel Creek that I learned about myself was because of the honing I had done,
Mm-hmm.
how grounded I felt. Like I was surprised. I just like 3 memorial services in 5 days, right, in my town, and
Mm-hmm.
um, I felt I felt really grounded through all of that, and it didn't feel like a suppressed, or delayed grief. It felt grounded,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
had a plan. I have a tight inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
Big groups don't do a lot for me, I guess, unless I'm the one up in front of them. It seems like
Mm-hmm.
I've taught myself
Mm-hmm.
how to do public speaking, but as an introvert,
Sure.
I keep a pretty tight inner circle of
Mm-hmm.
friends, and so being able to really dial in with those folks,
Mm-hmm.
being able to um, deal with what's in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
every day, what's going to be today. And again, shout out to all my HR colleagues. Typically we have our list, right? And then everybody's got I can't remember the saying, but everybody's got a plan until you get punched or whatever, right? Because who knows what walks through the door as soon as you are taking your coat off.
Totally.
But the ability to, again, have a team around you, I just can't express enough how blessed I've been in all three of my HR roles now to have been surrounded by amazingly top-notch professionals. And some of these folks were not HR professionals when they started, right? They came in with the building blocks. They came in with all those transferable skills. They understood discretion. They know how to keep a secret. They can, take an educative approach as opposed to a corrective approach. Well, gosh, if somebody can do that, I can teach them onboarding and recruiting and payroll and team communication. So that was part of it. We had great third-party administrator as part that helped us with our OSHA investigation. So again, that was a relationship we already had that helped us. We already had a intention and I think a pretty high achievement of excellence for operations. That's one of the things that I think ski resort business just prides itself on is operational excellence. You have to talk about going to work every day and then your chairs have a foot of ice caked on them, or it's the wind's blowing 80 miles an hour or whatever, right? Like you have to be able to adapt and be flexible and be resourceful. So that's kind of the other piece, is to figure out how you can build that in your own workplace, even if you're fully remote. I think knowing who those resources are, the remote world still allows us to kind of walk by the water cooler down the hall with our legal pad and go, hey, this person's on my radar today. I'm going to check in with them.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other piece. And for me, learning how to compartmentalize, and I didn't know what that word meant, but the ability to know that I was dealing with my grief, it's kind of over here. I'm not dealing with it through the bottle. I'm not dealing with it, by maladaptive behaviors. I've got it over here and I'm making a plan. As soon as the OSHA investigation was done, my wife and I headed to the coast for a week, and I just sat and looked at the water. And then I made plans to do a solo wilderness canoe trip that summer. Like I knew at the point where the summer was coming, I was going to get away and spend, for me, my regenerative time is in the wilderness. That's where I'm going to find myself again, find my peace and get re-grounded.
Right. So, and that's, I think that's a pretty critical point here, where people, especially in HR people roles, effectively become a main point of contact for these events. And I've already, just in the past few months, have caught so many stories of those folks almost displacing or moving aside or compartmentalizing their own well-being for the sake of others and supporting others first, right? Is there a process, and you had a relationship with that in that moment that helped you through this, but if somebody is new to supporting others in this fashion, can you talk a little bit about maybe, I don't know, advice or tips on how to ensure that they are also thinking about their own well-being in those moments?
Well, it's a tall order. Journaling, right? So if part of compartmentalizing onto paper,
sure,
and I think that tight inner circle for me, being able to know that I was it wasn't like I had just completely put it in a box. I was processing as well, but I was doing it with the 2 or 3 people who were very dear to me, and so I think that was real key. I have my own spiritual practice. I have cats. I have my fitness, like I have things that I rely on the routine of being
Mm-hmm.
able to go, okay, here's what I'm going to lean on these things
Mm-hmm.
in order to support me. And then if somebody knows of a book or an article or a speaker, I'm drawing a blank right now, but there's a ton of
Mm-hmm.
folks out there right now that
Sure.
I think speak to that ability to say, here's how to show up for
Mm-hmm.
other people.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how to
Mm-hmm.
not center yourself as you show up. Right. I mean, there's so many great things happening in the DEIB space right now in terms of that I think there's some transferable skills there.
Yeah.
And being able to, again, do your own work, go to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't think you have an issue, go to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Have that objective person be able to help you unpack some things, and not help you heal something from your childhood,
Mm-hmm.
or improve something that was dysfunctional in you, but
Mm-hmm.
just elevate your own sense of being able to show up, your own
Mm-hmm.
abilities, right? As an
Right.
HR person, as a leader, one of the things that came out of my chaplaincy program, that I carry, is again, they said this more than once. It was, what you don't know about someone is more important than what you do know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that really becomes a foundation for me to not center myself and think, oh, I know what's going on here. Right.
Right.
HR people know about inquiring for insight, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you have an investigative background in HR, you can pivot that into helping people in trauma
Mm-hmm.
and loss. And then also, know your boundaries. Know that you're not a professional counselor. Know that you're not a certified, grief specialist, but you are human. You're a
Mm-hmm.
leader in an
Mm-hmm.
organization. So, let's not be scared of showing up the best we can. And then
Mm-hmm.
also learn a little bit about, I think mental health first aid classes are one of those things that helps you go, what, this is, I'm not gonna get out of my lane here. This
Mm-hmm.
is a cause for a professional, right?
Sure.
I mean, I've
Sure.
been sitting on the floor of my office before, and, with somebody, really struggling and being upset, and going, what, it's time to drive to the crisis center.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be able to do this for you. What I can do is drive you to the crisis center.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can dial 988 and put you
Mm-hmm.
on the phone. But yeah, know your limits as well as your
Yeah.
boundaries. I guess both
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, I love that. There's a ton there, a ton of tips for a tall order. You certainly delivered there, but knowing your limits as well as your boundaries, I think can be pretty a pretty great foundational starting point. I've got another tall order for you, uh, because of what you've thought through and what you've been through. Right, we talk to a lot of people who are. Um, uh, there are a few things in place for bereavement at work, right? They don't necessarily think about bereavement response or a program, but it's the thought process to date has been things like out and often outdated policy, an EAP, someone that is in charge of sending flowers, probably a little bit of time off. We refer to it very affectionately here as random acts of bereavement. Um, I'm thinking about kind of helping people. We are thinking about and started to talk about helping people kind of reset there. And we're being asked to do things like that. If you're starting a bereavement response program, I'm going to call it a bereavement response program from scratch. Um, how would you think about structuring it? And we don't need to get like too detailed, but just
Mhm.
maybe some things to consider based on your experience and background. How do you set out to structure a bereavement response program?
Well, I knew this question was coming, so I actually did spend some time on it,
Awesome.
like the diligent HR person that most of us are here today.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, my boss needs a plan.
Right.
Um, you
Right.
know,
Mhm.
oh, I get to make a proposal, right? So I jotted down a few things. Empathy leave. I know that gets talked
Mhm.
about, right? Not just
Mhm.
bereavement leave, but
Mhm.
You know, if I would have been in the workplace when my close friend died by suicide,
Mhm.
is that covered?
Mhm.
Right. And,
Right.
and can we just automatically say it is, as opposed to an HR
Mhm.
person or a manager kind of making that judgment call and then
Mhm.
wondering if they're pushing the boundaries, or
Mhm.
we have inconsistency because one manager says no and the other manager says yes, to the
Mhm.
same
Mhm.
situation.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Two people, two different departments with the same friend. One of them gets
Yep.
bereavement leave, one of them doesn't. Right.
Mhm.
So I think the ability to align your organization that way, and that's
Mhm.
what HR is great at, right? Being able to say, look,
Mhm.
let's be consistent, and let's put this in place to where, uh, I'm a big fan of not replacing good judgment with rules, but you at least have to have
Mhm.
some guidance in place to
Sure.
where you've got good people who are going to generally make about the same judgment call. So I think
Mhm.
that's part of it. At one of my resorts at the time my mom died, I had 520 hours of sick leave. We had a
Mhm.
we had a cap of 520 hours, which is enough for FMLA, right? So you
Mhm.
can get paid FMLA on your sick leave, not on your vacation. And so I
Mm.
think a super assertive sick leave policy can help. We didn't accrue that, so we didn't pay it out on termination. Uh, but it's like, now this is your safety net, everybody. And I know that
Mhm.
different people treat that differently. Some folks are like, well, as soon as somebody gets 2 hours of sick leave, they call in sick. And it's like,
Right.
well, that's where
Right.
they are. For me, my lived
Mhm.
experience, I know that safety, after my mom, man, having
Mhm.
sitting on top of, all that bank sick leave, super nice.
Mm. Right.
And I think, think about the ROI on that.
Mhm.
Again, I'm probably, talking to folks who know, right? But if you're going to create a response program and not just a leave policy, think about the
Mhm.
ROI. Again, the company did not get much from me the 6 months after my dad died. They got
Mhm.
more from
Mhm.
me in the 2 months that I was actually home with my mom. Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
the day I was getting on an airplane to fly back to Michigan, my IT director came down and was like, here's a laptop. It has a VPN. And I'm like, what's that?
Mhm.
He's like, you're
Right.
going to be able to work from, like, you're going to open this up and this is going to be your desktop as if you were at
Mhm.
work. I'm like, wow,
Mhm.
really?
Mhm.
And so that was a big deal. Uh,
Mhm.
Having laptops to deploy to people if they don't have laptops, so they can,
Mhm.
work remotely if that's possible. I
Sure.
think, look at your life insurance. Make sure you've got counselors attached to that. Even if there's an hourly price on there, at least you have in the contract, like, your life insurance company is going to be able to dispatch people within 24 hours.
Mhm.
Um, Make sure your EAP has some teeth in it. It has web
Mhm.
resources. It has webinars. It
Mhm.
has all the things that you can
Mhm.
build that are helping people grow themselves again before the event happens.
Mhm.
Um, I already said it. Get your network in place.
Mhm.
Seek out your local EMS and see if they have a chaplain or uh, you know some organization that may have a chaplaincy program or a grief
Mhm.
counseling program that you can say, "Gosh, can we partner with you and uh, try to make sure that we can have you at the ready if we need you."
Yeah.
We went so far as to have on-site help. Like, after Tunnel Creek, we had a chaplain on site
Mhm.
1-2 days a week the whole next
Mhm.
year. For years after that became part of
Mhm.
our program.
Mhm.
um, you know Staff your so let's note here at minute 45, HR people, show this part of the recording to your CEOs and your general managers. Staff your HR department so they can absorb the big stuff,
Mhm.
and recognize that it takes a lot of energy to hold space for other people and to do this
Mhm.
work. It doesn't necessarily look productive. It's not going to show up in the results column of your performance review.
Mhm.
That your HR department has to be built in a way that it could absorb that big stuff. And I
Mhm.
say HR department broadly because I know sometimes it's, if you're an HR department of one, you've got other people who are kind of those resources, the HR function,
Sure.
right? Your
Sure.
people leaders.
Sure. Sure.
And then train your managers. Have some
Mhm.
training on mental health first aid, on how to inquire for insight, how to look for changed behavior, or some of the behaviors that come with grief. Um, One of the things that came out of Tunnel Creek is being able to walk up to people and just say, "It's good to see you." Because after
Mhm.
Tunnel Creek, everybody got tired of saying, "How are you?" Like,
Mhm.
I
Sure.
I know I know how you are. You're in pain.
Mm-hmm.
We're all walking
Mm-hmm.
around in pain. So good to see you alleviate somebody from having to make a flippant response or lie,
Right.
right, or
Right.
cover it
Right.
up.
Right.
And then the other thing I learned in some grief counseling was, how are you today? Right? You timestamp
Mm-hmm.
it. Not how are you?
Mm-hmm.
How are you today?
Right.
And even in that 72 hours of initial physiological stress after an event, being able to ask people, how'd you sleep? Are you drinking enough water? Did you take a walk?
Mm-hmm.
Right? These are this first 72 hours. It's a physiological response. We have to have that in place. And to me, that's
Mm-hmm.
part of a program as well, to go, yep, here's what we're doing. My recent employer had a former employee who died, and, organically people got together and did a celebration.
Mm-hmm.
HR didn't have to organize that. It was right. The
Sure.
people did that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, our HR generalist already had a walking crew every Thursday. And so it's like, hey, let's make sure we do the walking crew this week.
Right.
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 These
right.
things happen naturally. Somebody can organize gathering pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you can't write this in and assign someone because it's going to be different every time, but be on the lookout for who was close to this person,
Mm-hmm.
who might be able to gather up some photos and stories and send a card to the
Mm-hmm.
parents. Every parent probably wants to know, how their kid is at work, right? They don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so gathering stories and pictures that the parents or the loved ones, spouses, kids didn't have of their loved
Mm-hmm.
one, and go, hey, here's how this person showed up at work. Here's how we remember
Right.
them.
Right.
Yeah. Right. That's helping.
Sure. Yeah, totally. No, that's amazing. And in case anybody wasn't taking notes, we will summarize a lot of this and deliver that in our follow-up as well. Matt, thank you so much. Such a generous offer with your time and your insight and your experiences. Really, really grateful for your friendship. Also, a quick note, you do see the SHRM activity code there if anybody needs it. But also, Matt is recently on the market. So if you've loved what Matt has said today and the approach and the thoughtfulness as much as I do and we do, now's a great time to snap him up if you've got openings that could be a fit on your people team. We'll send his info and where to reach him in follow-up as well. SHRM credit is there. We'll include that in the follow-up. And we're going to be back in 2 weeks with a unique panel of people that have experienced loss while employed and how they've navigated their own journeys while really addressing the demands of work. Matt, thank you so much for being here. Super grateful again. And so until next week or 2 weeks from now, take care. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bereave.